There are no two words in the English language more harmful than good job.
Really? This speech given by Fletcher in Whiplash is what many reviewers and people use to defend Fletcher's abusive actions. Hello, my name is Alex Seidler, and I think Whiplash has to be one of the greatest films of 2014, as well as the most revealing and daring work of the year. My hope for Andrew throughout the film was that he would become successful after all his hardship and abuse, which is what I believe he actually achieved in the end. But on my third viewing, I realized that success was only in the fact that he perfected his drumming. I believe Whiplash dares to prompt the question of how far should one go for perfection, and whether the consequences outweigh the results in the end. Here's a brief summary. Andrew is a young, ambitious drumming student at the top jazz conservatory. Terrence Fletcher, a drill sergeant-like instructor who pushes his students beyond what is expected of them, sees something in Andrew and takes him under his wing. He begins pushing him to his absolute core. Fletcher spews insults and put-downs non-stop to everyone around him. After getting into a car accident from rushing to get to a performance he could miss, Andrew blows the show due to his injuries. After being told he is done from Fletcher, Andrew tackles him out of frustration, causing him to be expelled from the school. Andrew is convinced to turn Fletcher in after a former student named Sean Casey is revealed to have killed himself due to the pressure Fletcher put on him. Later, Andrew catches Fletcher at a coffee shop, and after catching up a little, Fletcher asks Andrew to perform in his new band he's orchestrating. This turns out to be a trick so Fletcher can embarrass him in front of everyone for turning him in. However, Andrew then comes back on stage and takes control of the situation and perfects a drum solo, proving to Fletcher he is a great musician after all. First, let's start with Fletcher. Fletcher is a little bit more complicated than his words let on. In a superficial view, the story sounds like a classical underdog feel-good sports movie, which reaffirms the theme of success coming from hard work and determination. But here, we get a different vibe. The rooms are always dark, the people are so quiet, and the music is chilling. The training Fletcher puts Andrew through makes you feel scared for the drummer rather than hopeful for his victory.
3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3.
I will fuck you like a pig. Or are you gonna be on my fucking time? Jesus fucking Christ! I didn't know they allowed retards into Shaper. Now answer my question. Were you rushing or were you dragging? Answer! You are a worthless, friendless, faggot-lipped little piece of shit whose mommy left daddy when she figured out he wasn't Eugene O'Neill, and who is now weeping and slobbering all over my drum set like a fucking 9-year-old girl.
All this abuse plays into the idea and motivation behind Fletcher, which is true greatness is never achieved without true hardship. But the problem with that is in Fletcher's own words.
But is there a line? You know, maybe you go too far and you discourage the next Charlie Parker from ever becoming Charlie Parker?
No, man, no. Because the next Charlie Parker would never be discouraged.
Yeah.
The rebuttal to this opinion is Sean Casey. Fletcher admits that he never had a student become as great as Charlie Parker, who is a famous drummer in the 1930s and one who Fletcher admires greatly. He said in the beginning that Sean Casey was a great musician, but because he ended up committing suicide, he realized that he wasn't one of the greats. He affirms the next Charlie Parker would not be discouraged, which includes taking his own life, so he cried because he realized Casey wasn't a great player. So despite the fact that Fletcher might have caused one of his students suicide, the only thing he shed a tear for was that he wasn't who he was looking for. I found this alarming when I first heard it, because there seemed to be no line for Fletcher. Eric Neer writes that Fletcher cannot accept that anyone knows better than he does. So how many students can Fletcher be allowed to kill before he finds his Charlie Parker? Since Andrew manages to nail the drum solo at the end, Fletcher will always feel justified in what he has done, and won't stop to think of how many casualties he took to create great musicians. Next, let's talk about Andrew's relationship with Fletcher and his father, who has a supportive role in the film, but contributes a lot to the theme of the film. Andrew's father is a teacher whose wife walked out on him when Andrew was young. To Andrew, his father represents failure and unfulfilled aspirations. He clearly doesn't want to be like his father, who he sees as a failure, and he thinks Fletcher's challenge will make him successful. During the dinner scene, as Andrew is talking about his goals of being the best musician of the century, His father warns him of what happened to Charlie Parker, to which Andrew replies,
I'd rather die drunk, broke at 34 and have people at a dinner table talk about me than live to be rich and sober at 90 and nobody remember who I was.
Ah, but your friends will.
Andrew's father clearly wants what's best for him, but his own son clearly only cares about what Fletcher thinks. Fletcher in the beginning acts like a normal mentor who encourages Andrew, but after messing up for the first time, the dynamics of the mentor-mentee relationship begin to change. Andrew slowly becomes less concerned about doing his best and more concerned about measuring up to Fletcher's standards. Barbara Schildrott writes that Andrew might take Fletcher's abuse because he sees him as a father figure who is more successful than his own, and perhaps also a replacement for his mother. Lastly, the end is probably one of the most significant moments in the film. While it looks championing, I find it more haunting. So now we learn that Fletcher's abuse has caused Andrew to perfect his drumming. But now, Andrew has lost everything that originally mattered to him in the first place. He broke up with his girlfriend, strained his relationship with his father, and just all around fails to care about anything other than Fletcher's opinion and perfecting his drumming. It's no doubt that Fletcher has proven his point that without true hardship, greatness is never fully achieved. But to achieve that level of greatness, Andrew lost more than he had gained in the end. Fletcher's abuse will always have a PTSD effect on Andrew, and most likely never wear off. Kinda like a war hero, which is why I think this movie is often compared to Full Metal Jacket, a relentless, loudmouth instructor with no limits who spews insults to train a group of obedient young men to turn them into champions, but only succeeds in dehumanizing them in the end. I think the comparison is more than just with the instructors. I believe Whiplash shows us the dangers of being pushed too far when it comes to our desire for success. It shows us that if we don't see our limits, we may become too blind in our quest to achieve greatness. John Casey didn't find his limits, Charlie Parker didn't, and neither did Andrew, who will most likely die young after he no longer thinks he can reach his own standard of success. Even in the drum solo, you only see Andrew smile for one of the first times in the film. He smiled because he finally thought he impressed his instructor, but sadly that moment of happiness won't last too long. He will always remain critical of himself and might even follow the same path as Sean Casey and die young. Star Miles Teller says Andrew's life from then on will probably be a pretty lonely existence and miserable. I believe Whiplash dares to prompt the question of how far should one go for perfection, and whether the consequences outweigh the results in the end. Because if there's no limits, one might lose track of what really matters in life.